All right, let's do homework 1.3. So the way I start homework is by going to the homework card, and then I'm going to click on Notebook. This brings up all the questions, and often we'll have like code hints and little bits of code like the imports and file path for the data sets that we're working with in the homework. But the first thing to do is to go up here to File, click on Save a Copy in Drive, and then I'm going to load all the imports and load the data. So the first question is about US economic growth. So we have this data set US real GDP.csv. And here you can see it has annual US real GDP between these 2 years. And this is what the data set looks like. So we have a column for year and a column for real GDP. So the first question is, what's the data structure? Well, this is time series. We have one entity, and we're not even including that entity as a column because it's implied. And we're measuring that one entity through many years. So we'll say this is time series. And then the second thing to do is to create a line graph of real GDP over time. So in this case, all we have to do is use Seaborn. So we have sns.line plot. And then I'm going to give it the data set, so GDP. And then the horizontal axis is going to be year. So X is going to be year. And then the vertical axis is going to be real GDP. So Y is equal to real GDP. And when I run this, I get a line that looks like this. So nice, here's real GDP over these years. Okay, so then describe the trend. I would say overall, the trend is positive. And then we see a little bump here and a bump here, and then maybe a little one here with declines during recession. Okay, so nice. That's pretty good. And then the next thing, we have our question 2, so US economic growth rates. So we're going to use the same real GDP data set, but we're going to create a new column that calculates the annual growth rate of real GDP. This is the formula. There's a way of constructing this formula using the standard transformations we're familiar with. But it turns out there's a really nice shortcut. This is something we do often enough that there's actually a built-in little function into pandas. Okay, so I'm just going to use this and copy this in. And this gives us a new variable, real GDP. Well, we haven't defined a new variable yet. This is just giving us a row. But we're in the GDP data set, we're going to define this to be percent change. So we do this, and then we print out the data set, so GDP. We have our two original data, or two original columns, but now we have a third one, the one we just created. Okay, so, but the question is asking to create a line graph of growth rates over time. So I'm going to do something very similar to what I did here. In fact, it's so similar, I'm just going to copy it down. So sns.lineplot GDP, X is year, and then Y is going to be percent change. And when I plot this, I get the percent change of US GDP through time. And you can see anytime it goes below 0 for a while, that's an indicator of a recession. You can see this is a really big one. This was another pretty big one. And then there was another, I guess this was a recession in the 80s. Okay, so that's sort of the answer to this question. In which years did the US economy shrink, negative growth? And what might explain these periods? Well, these are recessions. And you'd have to know something about economic history to mention what might explain these periods, but we see negative growth in the mid 1970s. Early 1980s, 2008, and then 2020. All right. And then what's the average growth rate over this period? Well, what I'm going to do is just take an average of our new column. So I have GDP, and then percent change, and then I'm just going to take the mean, which gives us this little number here. So that's the average growth rate. It's about 2.8%. Okay, so nice. We have this is pretty good growth rate. This may seem like a small number, but that's pretty meaningful. All right, so question 3, seasonal patterns in coffee prices. So we have this data set monthlycoffeeprices.csv, which has monthly coffee prices between these years. So I'm gonna load this. So I have date, I have price, I have month and year, each one of these columns. So the first part of this question is to create a multi-box plot of coffee prices grouped by month. So we want a multi-box plot. And the way I would start this is by just constructing a box plot. So I have sns.boxplot. And then I'm going to give it the data set prices. Now, when I'm thinking about what this should look like, I want coffee prices. I'm going to use the horizontal axis to set up coffee prices. And then I want each month represented on the vertical axis. So I want X to represent price, and then I want the vertical to be month. And if I run this, then I get this thing. This is pretty good, but I want to define whiskers to be between 0 and 100, just so we don't include the outliers. And that looks like this. Okay, did we answer the question? Create a multi-box plot of coffee prices grouped by month. I think we did. Okay, so then which month has the highest median price? So this is kind of hard to tell, but I'm gonna say that it's March. All right. So which months show the most price volatility? So the largest range. That one looks like April. So let's say April. And based on the multi-box plot, is there a clear seasonal pattern in coffee prices? I don't know that there is. It looks like maybe April has, or spring has the highest maximum price, but I don't see a lot of other patterns here. So let's say spring seems to have the highest maximum price. Okay, so then lastly, let's just think about choosing the right visualization. So we've created all of these figures here. If you wanted to know whether coffee prices are higher today than in 2000, which visualization would you use? I would use a line graph. So be line graph. I want to show how things have changed and then be able to compare between 2 years. The multi-box plot would not make this very clear. And then if you wanted to know whether coffee prices tend to be higher in certain months, which visualization would you use? I would use a multi-box plot by month. Okay. So I think we've answered all the questions, and I think we've answered them clearly. If I've made any mistakes here, I've caught them and included them in the solutions, which are posted. I'll see you in the next one.